Hey everyone, welcome back to the ACP-620 study sessions. I got Rodney here with me, and today we're going to be starting a whole new learning module, learning path. And it says 30 minutes, Rodney. You know it's going to take us 5 weeks.
I won't say 5 weeks, but 5 sessions, I believe.
Yeah.
But
So it's going
this
to take us
one may not.
yeah,
This one may
may,
not, because
we'll see.
this sounds very familiar to something you just did, Alex.
Absolutely. So just to catch you all up, last week we wrapped up the first learning path. And so as part of this ACP-620, Atlassian gives us a series of on-demand trainings that you can actually take that help you out. And so we've already done the what is a Jira software project, what are permissions, what are roles within the project. And today we're going to start a new one, which is basically configuring your software projects to support team efficiency. And the first module that we're going to kick things off with is configuring these work items and fields in software projects. Again, these are totally free. We're just kind of following through with them. I highly recommend you walk through these courses. They're very valuable in at least giving you a refresher as to what's going on, how these things work in the back end. And these things may or may not be on the test, but it at least gives you some structure to kind of follow through. So first section we're going to start off with here is exploring work types, fields, and screens in company managed projects.
I noticed that it's a work type and not something else.
An issue type. Oh, Atlassian, I love how somebody must have sat there and updated all this. And I like that they
I'm,
updated it.
I'm hoping it was just a Control F search for them.
Oh, I hope so too. Okay. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to differentiate work types, request types, fields, and screens, describe the purpose of work types, request types, fields, and screens, and describe the relationship between request and work types. So what is a work type? So work types indicate what category of work a work item represents. I don't think Atlassian thought this whole let's overuse the word work over and over and over. But
the biggest problem a lot of people have with Jira is it's related to work. And emphasizing that seems like a mistake to me.
yeah, I would have gone with what did I want? I want a ticket.
Ticket would have been good. I know this is going to be what I do for the next year, but I still call them issues when I'm not thinking.
Oh, I know. It's hard to not call it an issue. We should have quizzed Mike on it. I feel like during our interview we should have gone, "Hey, Mike, so is it an issue type?"
There may be another opportunity coming up to interview a high-level Atlassian about it, so let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind. And if you're interested in that, I just want to call out two very specific things right now. One, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, now is a great chance and an opportunity for you to hit that subscribe button. We are, what was it, Ronnie? 20?
21.
21, and there's 20 of you watching the live stream right now. So if each one of you hit that subscribe button, we will make it to 2,000 subscribers by the end of this live stream here.
That's 21 to 1900. We have 121 to get to 2000.
Never mind. Go find 100 of your closest friends and have them also hit the subscribe button so we can get to 2,000. Ronnie's giving me bad information at the beginning here, but at least help us get to 1900. Smash the subscribe button. If each one of you hits it, we'll get to 1900 by the end of the stream. Number two, special shout out and thank you to Revyz for making this and the entire series of our ACP-620 live streams possible. We couldn't be doing this without Revyz because they back us up. They always have our back, and they should be backing up your Jira as well. So make sure you check out Revyz. Link in the description, but check them out in the Atlassian Marketplace. They are there to back up your Jira. All right, Rodney. So now that we know how to back up our Jira, let's back it on up into our course here and talk about work types. And so not all work is created equal. You sometimes want to categorize or classify or bucketize different, what are these adjectives? Your work, right? You want to classify your work into the types of work that they are, because again, not all work is created equal. And so Jira allows us to classify our work, or what they're calling categorize their work, by putting things inside of what's called a work item. Now Jira ships with work items out of the box. You have things like epics that represent larger bodies of work. You have bugs that typically represent problems, stories, and tasks that represent things that need to get done. And then subtasks that are a little bit more micro in nature and represent a smaller piece of work that needs to get done. On the service side, because there's different types of Jira templates, on the service side, we have change items, we have IT help, incidents, new features, problems. And so there's all kinds of different types of work that Jira is good for. So Jira traditionally was good for tracking software, right? It was great for tracking things that needed to be done at the software level, but Jira can work for anything because you can also create new work types. So if you wanted to track like employee offboarding or onboarding, or if you wanted to, Atlassian told us what they had an invoicing Jira project at one point,
Yeah,
right?
invoice.
Yeah, so if you wanted to track invoices, you could do whatever you want. Jira is super flexible to track whatever you want, and so you can create new work items.
If you want to create something larger than Epic, the initiative, if you will, absolutely can do that.
Yep. Now, one thing you should know is that Atlassian, or specifically Jira, has this concept of a hierarchy. Now, out of the box, you have a triple tier hierarchy. You have your epic sits at the top, then you have your bugs, stories, and tasks below the epic, and then you have your subtasks below the story, the task, and the bug. And if you're on the premium, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford the premium version of Jira, you can alter your hierarchy. Okay, so so again, just know that there's a lot of different types of work that we can work on and capture. Now, work types impact many project configurations. I always start with work type. So once we get through the hurdle of, do we want a Scrum project? Do we want a Kanban project? Do we want a software project? Do we want a team managed project? Do we want a company managed project? Right. Once we get through those hurdles, right, and we add people to it, right. Again, look back at our first 5 live streams, because this is session number 6. Right. But once you get through those hurdles, the next logical question, and this is the place I always start, Rodney. I don't know about you. I don't know where you start your engagements, but I always start with, okay, so we have a project. We figured out who's who in the zoo. We figured out what projects, how many projects we need, what kind of projects we want. But now we zoom into one project and we go, okay, let's start with the work types. Let's start with the issue types, because everything else that we're going to talk about, workflows and fields and required fields and pretty much the majority of these subsequent configurations, they are centered around the work type. So getting this right is important.
Yeah. That's typically one place to start. It usually takes the form of question, what do you guys actually do week to week?
Yep. So again, work types impact many project configurations, right? This is what I basically just said. Jira admins use several different schemes to associate work types. Don't worry if you don't know what the word scheme is. By the end of this course, you will be infatuated with schemes.
Or you will curse their existence. Either one is valid.
Yeah, either one we're okay with. We're here for either or. Work type schemes define which work types company managed projects use. So the work type scheme is basically a bucket that contains all the work types that are relevant to your project. Now, little disclaimer, I really don't know why Atlassian did this, because the title of this is Configure Work Items and Fields in Software Projects. And all of a sudden, I have service management stuff in here. Why?
Because service management is a little weird, and it's not unheard of that a JSM project would be an ingest point for software project.
Yes, but two things that come to mind, Ronnie. One, the title of this course is Configure Work Items and Fields in Software Projects. And two, there's an ACP-620 that specializes in the service management stuff.
I mean, I'm assuming it's just a good for you to know. I mean, this is stuff me and you already do know, but putting ourselves in a project admin role, they may not be aware of this just because this never crossed their sphere of influence.
Maybe. All right. So let's take a little detour, because Atlassian wants us to go down this detour. But in service management, and I think this is an incorrect statement, by the way, work types are called request types. They're not. In a Jira service management project, you still have work types, and the request types sit on top of the work type. They don't replace it. And
so you could have a work type of ticket, but you could have multiple request types underneath that ticket. One being password change request type, or a laptop fix request type, or whatever you're doing for your particular JSM project.
Yeah, and fundamentally, at the end of the day, while you do technically put screens or fields on a request type, they have to exist at the work type first. And the workflows are applied to the work type, not the request type. And so, I mean, technically, in all technicality, a JSM project still fundamentally works just like a Jira software. The request type just augment and sit on top, but the core principle is still at the work type level. So to say that they are the same is not
Wrong.
true. Yeah. All right. So in company managed service projects, Jira admins configure the request types through work type schemes. Sure. No. I'm gonna fail the 420.
I'm glad we probably should be looking at our friend Rob Haynes for 20 course at some point.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little worried now. All right. So for example, a service request work type controls configurations for several request types, including fixed an account. Yeah. So these are just requests. I would not put request types and work types in the same sentence or here. Like they're just two totally different things. Okay. So now that we have work types, right? So now that we know that we have these buckets to track different types of work, the next logical question is, well, what kind of, for each of that different type of work, what do you want to track, right? What kind of data do you want to collect from your users? And so that's where fields come into play. So fields enable users to add and track data onto the work items. So for example, we have fields like the description, summary, assignee. These are fields that ship with Jira that allow you to track very important information. And we have system fields that are in all the Jiras by default, and they're critical how Jira works. A very common one that ships with Jira is the summary. Folks confuse the summary. They don't know that the summary is the title.
And also, it is, I'd argue, the most important field in Jira.
I would agree with you. If there's any field in Jira that is an absolute showstopper, is not having a summary. So you have to have a summary.
Mm-hmm.
So a key field is something that must be on every work item in Jira because it assigns a unique identifier to each work item. It's funny because like even though I fundamentally understand the key is a field in Jira, it's not a field that you ever like add to a screen or anything. So it's not one that I ever consider as a field. But it is a field. Some system fields are required, like the key and the summary. You can only modify the description. You can't modify the configuration or delete them. Other fields allow you to make them required, or optional, or hidden. And then Jira admins can create custom fields as well. So, for example, you can create.
We're going to tangent here.
Uh-oh. We're on a roll.
Required fields. You should be aware, especially if you're a project admin. If you make a field required, it will need to have something entered into it upon creation. There are ways you can make fields required later in a workflow, but that's not called a required field. If you're saying I need a required field, I understand what you're asking is this field needs to be created or used and filled out at creation. Just one of those things that I've speaking with project admins as much as I have, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, Alex. This is not a point they often understand.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, and I don't know the exact detail right now, but there are some fields that you just simply cannot make required using the field configuration. I'm blanking on it, but I want to say that the description field is like a field that you cannot make required through field configuration. Let's test it out. If only we had Jira. Rodney says, do you know why work item ID isn't available in the filter search? I have to export them to see the work item IDs.
Do you mean the key? The key, the Jira key is something like for the project ADV, it'd be ADV-1 to etc.
Yeah, but you can export that as long as you include it in your columns, right? Because you can put key. The key is here.
Not key, the ID.
Why do you need the ID for a work item?
You do need it for some API calls. I could see that. But this is the ID. I think it fits what I think you're thinking of, Estrada. Um,
Other Ronnie.
it's very well. Last name works. I'm keeping this in all day long. Uh, it's very crucial to how Jira works internally. So unless you're dealing with the API, either REST or programmatic APIs, you hardly ever have to deal with these. So that's why
Yeah.
it's not made available to the end user.
Yeah. And as a Jira admin, I usually go grab the ID by going to the work item, and you see it in the URL up here. So you don't necessarily have to export anything. You can just simply go to the gear, go to work types, and then just I don't even think you need to click on it, right? You just have to go over here to edit and down at the very bottom. Let's move the Rodney's comment, right? Down at the very bottom, when you go to hover, you'll see the ID down there, 10084. But for sure, when you click on the button itself, it'll put the ID in the URL up top. So there's a different way to get the ID without having to export stuff.
But the answer is because it's internal how Jira works. You're kind of using a very advanced use case here, and while I'm not saying it's not valid, it's perfectly valid. They don't want everyone having access to those IDs, without good cause.
Okay, so now back to the other thing we're trying to prove, right? So I'm telling you that the description field is not one I can make required. Pretty sure.
I believe it. Description's a little weird.
Oh, it's there. There's a required button there. I could have sworn there's like a field in here that just does not have. Maybe the assignee. I could have sworn that there's like a default field here. See, the assignee I cannot make required, but the assignee should. Well, no, the assignee is not required. So you cannot make the assignee required like you can the other fields. And this is a default field or system field.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, a little tangent, little sidebar, but just know that not every default field can be made a required field. So just some nuances that you'll pick up along the way.
Yeah, I don't like required fields as a concept. I get they're needed sometimes, but I think it slows down the whole experience as a Jira user.
Yeah. So it's important to note, though, that all your system fields and then even your custom fields, right, they're in a general pool. And I was just talking about this in my last class, like 17 minutes ago, right? But there's a pool, and I'm going to redo my graphic. There's a pool where you have all your fields in there. So the moment you create a custom field or the moment your Jira is born, there's fields in a pool already. And you get to choose from that pool. Now, just because the field exists doesn't mean that it's in play. It doesn't mean that users can use it or populate it with data. That comes later, right? But know that you can do things at the field configuration scheme, like making the field required, making it searchable, right? Changing the render of it. You can control it at the field configuration scheme. But most of the time, when somebody adds a field and they want the field to be visible in Jira, then you actually add it to a screen, not the field configuration. The field configuration, again, is different. And it's unintuitive, right? Because you would think that you would control fields in the field section, but you don't. You control fields in the screen section. So the screens allow us to see specific work item operations. So we can control which fields are visible when we create, we can control which fields are visible when we edit, and we can control which fields are visible when the user views Jira. And I can also control when you see Rodney or not.
Apparently. Now the SFP port I was using on my main switch decided to die, so that's my connection to my PC, so I get that gigabit plus speed.
Except for when it doesn't work.
Except for when it doesn't work.
You get 0 gigabytes.
Experimental network technologies and all that.
I just plugged my computer into the network.
Oh, it is plugged in. It was just plugged into a 2.5 gigabit port. And that decided, because it's a adapter, to not adapt anymore.
More money, more problems.
As a network admin too.
Yeah, apparently.
And a Slack admin, and yeah, I got a bunch of hobbies.
Yeah, too many hobbies. Okay, so Jira admins. We're talking about screens. Jira admins configure screens by adding and removing tabs, adding and removing fields on those tabs, and changing the orders of fields. And you can then associate each screen with the work item operation, like the create, edit, and view that I was just talking about in your screen scheme. So, for example, a user see the work item work. Dang it, I cannot read today. For example, users see work type, summary, assignee, and due date fields first on the create screen, but on the view screen, they only see work type, summary, and description. So the assignee and due dates are in a different tab. And so it is possible for you to have some fun with this, right? You can get a little creative here, and you can go to your screens and you can grab one of your screens here, and your screens ultimately add. This is where you add your fields. So if you had a new field like acceptance criteria, you can click on that, and now your field is available or visible on the create, right? You can also add tabs, and you can call this like agile stuff, right? And you can create it over there, and you can just simply move the field over. So you actually have to remove it from over here, bring it over here, and bring it over there. Because if it's in, a field cannot exist in both tabs at the same time. It can only be on one.
Do you use tabs in your practice?
I use spaces. I'm just kidding. No.
No, I like tabs to like organize fields for what specific team or job function needs to access it, but I don't like tabs because it hides information from the immediate viewing.
Yeah, I think it's for the untrained eye, it's unintuitive, and they don't know to go look at the tab.
Yeah.
And so I try to avoid tabs, but I usually have folks like the time that I do use tabs is when I have a requirement, a business requirement from usually from a person that doesn't understand Jira very well. And they have like 50 fields that they want that are in play, right? Whether they're on the create or in the view or the edit later, there's usually too many fields. And to just have a long list of all the fields, it's usually unintuitive for me. So we'll use tabs to kind of break them up. There's like a compliance tab, so you put all your compliance fields in there. You have like a QA tab, so you can put all your QA work in there, and so you can segregate all the different fields. But again, it's not intuitive because most people don't use the tab. So if you don't know about it, if you don't know to go look for it, you might forget. Okay, so everything's in the work type screen. So for example, the bug work type should have an environment field on all its screens. However, stories don't. And so that basically means that if I were to go into a Jira project itself, and let me just go into the one where I can't spell the name of my own company. Let's just go into the one we're just using in our demo for the previous class. If you go to your screens here, you have a Jira project, platform development. That platform project or that software project has an issue type screen scheme here. That issue type screen scheme contains one or many issue types. Usually by default, you get bugs and everything else broken up, right? And then in here, you have a screen scheme that is a collector for those operations to create, edit, and view. And then for each one of these, you can then call out a screen. Okay.
Correct.
And you can play with any permutation of all of this, which is what makes Jira hard, right? Because any permutation of this can be changed. It's not just one or the other. You have a lot of options here.
Flexibility is the name of the game.
Flexibility is the name of the game, and I'll never forget Mike. And then you will feel like, once you figure it all out, by the way, you will feel like Neo from the Matrix.
You do. I can see everything.
I know everything. Okay. So customize what your users see in projects with layouts. So the screens are important, right? The screens control which fields are visible and not visible. So you can add and you can remove fields. But on the view itself, when you open an issue, when you go to a project and you open a story, when you open a task, when you open something up, where the fields show up can be configured as well. And that is done in what's called an issue layout or a work layout. And so, for example, if you want to move your priority to the top for everybody, you can click on this little configure button, and you basically grab your priority, wherever the heck it's at, here, and you move it to the top. You put it right there, right above assignee. And when you hit your save changes, when you go back into the issue, you open it up, your priority is now at the top. And it is at the top for everybody, not just for you, it's there for everybody, which is different than pinning, because you have the ability to personally pin a field and it moves it to the pinned section, which is the top, but that's personalized for you. For if you wanted to impact the order for everybody, you have to do it at the field layout, or sorry, the issue layout. That's basically what all this is saying. Let's see what we learned, Ronnie. What is a work type?
Work type.
I think it's, oh, wait, are these drag and drops? Select the matching pair. Okay. Wow, that was like accidentally clicked and I got it right.
Huh.
All right. A field is a collection of items.
Yep, middle one.
Yeah. And then a screen is a collection. There you go. Yay. All right. Which of these does a Jira admin not use a scheme to configure? Layouts? We have work type schemes. We have field, well, we have a field configuration scheme. This is a trick question.
I think it's layout.
There really is no scheme for fields, though. I mean, there's a field configuration scheme, but not a field scheme.
I think it counts.
Well, by that count, I'm gonna go with layout, but I'm pretty sure it's fields. Why wouldn't, like, I feel like this is such a bad question. This is the problem I think that Atlassian sometimes has, right? Where I think they have great intentions, but I don't think Atlassians understand like what's the word I'm looking for?
The nuance?
No, not nuance. Like you and I start to build behaviors, right? Like we spend so much time in the tool that we can get nitpicky on the technicalities of Jira. Right? Like to like Joanne, a field is a field. But to us, the field and the field configuration are two very, 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 very different things. And again, this is why I'm like, I wonder how much the test creators, maybe this is why Bob helps out a lot, right? Because I would assume Bob would catch those nuances. All right, moving on to the next 10-minute module here. Configure how fields appear on work items in a company managed project. So by the end of the lesson, you're going to configure the layout of your work items, customize the fields on the request form, and describe. This feels like the last thing that we did. Okay,
yeah.
So look at this. We're doing what I just did, right? So you can configure the layout for your work items.
To explain that joke here, if you guys are not aware, Alex hosts on behalf of Atlassian some community-led learning once a week. And his time slot for that is literally right before we come on here.
For some reason.
He scheduled it. Don't look at me. But I'll jump on every now and again and hassle him because it's fun. But he literally just covered this topic.
No, but I'm also talking about, I literally just covered this topic 2 minutes ago as well. So how do you configure the layout? You do what we just did. You go to the works, you go to a project. I like to do the shortcut. I like to go here, but the technical way is you need to be a project admin. Although there is now a setting, there's a permission that you can open it up for other people. But you go to your project settings, you go to issues or work items, and you go to layout. And once you're here, you then pick which, see, this is more on the scheme than anything else, but you pick which of these screen scheme ones you're going to use. And so you pick whether you're going to do the story or the bug. And if you wanted to break it up, right, if you wanted to say, well, I just want to modify it for the task, well, you need to go to the screens and you need to create a screen scheme for the task and a screen for the task, and put that screen scheme with that associated screen into the issue type screen scheme for this project. And then your layout will work. In the chat, who wants to see me build that out real quick? You want me to build that out, Rodney?
Nah.
He says no. It's very complicated. It's not complicated. I will do it in 10 seconds. Bill says no thanks, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it real quick, guys. Because it's really not hard. Here's what I do. I start.
This is
with,
Alex going off script, guys. It's just what he does.
It's just so easy.
We love him for it, but it's hilarious.
Because it's so complicated. And I'm gonna show you. I will finish this in 60 seconds. Somebody start a timer. Okay, ready, set, go. So you go to your screen. You copy. You find your screen, and you make a copy of this one. Okay, and then you're gonna. What I like to do is I like to keep this here, and I'm gonna put task. And I do start at the bottom up. I start with at the lowest level, and I work my way up. Then I go to my screen scheme, and I'm gonna find my screen scheme that is my default one, and I'm gonna make a copy of that one. Okay. And once your copy is there, I do basically the exact same thing, and it kind of feels unintuitive. But I now made all I've done is I made a screen for the task, and I made a screen scheme for the task. Right. Then over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my task one, and I'm going to click edit here, because now I want to swap out not the default ones, but I want to swap it out for my task one that I made. So I'm going to do this here, and then I'm just going to keep things simple, and I'm just going to delete the other one that I had. Right. So I now have a task screen with a task screen scheme. Awesome. Then the last step is to go to the screen scheme, issue type screen scheme that I had. Go in here, edit it, configure. You want to configure. And once you're configuring it, right, you're going to add an issue type. We're going to do the task. And then we're going to do our plat that we had that's based on our task. And once we do that, now we will have a task. And there's no saving or anything you do here. So done. By the way, stop the timer. Right? You can stop the timer now. I think that took 60 seconds. Right? But now when I go to my project settings and I go to my layout, now I can have my task, and now I can mess or move the fields around just for the task. Which is why that last question about schemes, I feel like was a bad question, because you see how you have to use the screen schemes to do the layout.
I want to be honest, I was distracted by your wife's new logo.
That it has a nibble, not a bite.
Yeah.
Ronnie,
That's
you obviously have
science joke. For those out there who don't know, a nibble is 4 bits or half a byte.
Yeah, Lena, you might want to add another 4 nibbles or another nibble there to get the full byte. Phil says lots of clicks equals very complicated, in my honest opinion. Phil, this is why we charge what we charge.
Mm-hmm.
I have this client right now that she's always telling me, like, this is so hard. Why is this so unintuitive? I'm like, that is why I charge you what I charge you. Because it takes me 10 seconds to do it for you. Okay. Maybe Lena's going to change it to a nibble with Lena.
Now I'm hungry.
I know. All right. So that's how all that works. So I think this took care of all of that. So everything here is exactly what I just described to you. But let's talk about this work item view. I think this one's an interesting one. This is only in why are we covering this in this project though? I don't know that this is appropriate, but let's cover it here. So one thing that I wanted you to look at is when you're looking at this view of the layout on a software project, you're just manipulating the fields. That's all you got to do. Okay. Ronnie says, Alaskan, if you're out there, please make a distinction between delete and remove. Alex just clicked delete to remove a screen from the scheme, but technically it was removed, not deleted. Ah, yes.
Yeah, we were talking about this the last hour with Alex's Life Learning, Ape Tech tutorials on
save
YouTube.
And publish.
But the difference between what schemes you save and which ones you don't save.
Yeah, there should be consistency there. Okay. I will take a little sidebar because the class is taking us there. But if you're in a JSM project, when you are in the same view, right? When you go to your, oh crap, where's my issue types? My issue types aren't even there. Like there's no layout. So to do the layout, you have to go into this request type, and then you open up the request type, and then you're going to be in this view that looks like the layout. but it's not the layout. It's not called the layout, right? But just know that you do have a request form, and I do want to walk you through this. Again, it shouldn't be on the test because this is ACP-420 material, not 620 material. But when you are in a JSM project and you're looking at the exact same screen, right, or the same page, you have a request form. This is the public-facing stuff. This is when your end user clicks on the portal, what fields they're going to see. So you can control what fields they see there. But as an added bonus, you also have the issue view, which controls which fields your agent sees. And this right here feels more like the issue layout that we were just looking at. But just know that you do have a back end and a front end when it comes to JSM. The issue view is the back end, which is really just the regular view that we have in Jira software. And the request form is a very similar but different view that allows you to control what the end user sees when they're going to go through the portal to submit a request. So again, nuances, and you got to know the differences between JSM and Jira software. So what can you change? So you can change which fields are in the description area, which is the main section, right? So there's a fat section. I call it the fat section, but there's a description fields here. And really, the description field is when you open an issue up, it's this middle section right here. Again, I call it the fat section because it's big, but there's this big section here. And then you have the details. The context is what they call it over here on the right. Yes, fat with the PH, exactly, like Fat Gus from Mark Rober. Okay, and then you have the hidden, and the hidden is down here. It's under more fields, and you can actually collapse this one. And basically, if a field is not populated upon its inception, upon the create button, then it'll be in the more fields. But if it is populated, it'll show up under the details over here. So those are all the nuances you got to be aware of. Oh, another little fun fact. From the layout, you can hide fields, so remove them, right? I think going back to Rodney's thing, Atlassian should have some consistency here. We can remove a field and not delete the field, and the field won't be visible on the layout anymore. But it might still be in the create, so keep that in mind. Did I get all that correct, Ronnie? I feel like I'm going through this quickly, but that's essentially what we just talked about.
I think you got it.
All right, so configuring different layouts for work and request types. So depending on your project schemes or how your project schemes are configured, you may have multiple work types or groups of work types for which you can configure separate layouts. For example, let's say your team uses components and time in the tracking fields for bug, but not as yet. So we did this already when I broke up the task. So just know that for each work item, you can separate them or you can keep them all together. The requirement is really in what the business needs, right? What they're asking for. Okay, so what if a field you need isn't available? Dun, dun, dun. Where's your sound effects, Ronnie?
I don't know. I still need to work on that. I'll put it on the list somewhere after the new intro, the new outro.
And sound effects.
Yeah. But
you were going to say something, Ronnie. Sounded like you wanted to say something.
Yeah. Again, for this exam, we're focusing from the perspective of a project admin. So as a project admin, what do you do if a field isn't needed? I feel like the default answer from most every project admin who's actually practicing is going to be submit a ticket to your Jira admin.
Ain't that the truth? Okay. So what if a field isn't available? You can only configure fields available in the field configuration scheme for that work type. This means that some work types will have fields available that others don't. You can always hide a field by removing it from the hidden fields area, but you can't add fields that aren't already there. For example, your project's field configuration scheme may show the environment field for a bug, but not others. If you want to add a field to the layout, your Jira admin can update the field configuration scheme. See, this is so misleading though, Ronnie, because I never, ever go to the field configuration to add or remove a field. I never hide a field. I always just go to the screen.
Yeah, take it off the screen.
It's really all you got to know. Just add things to the screen. Make your life easier. Only go to field configurations when you need to make the field required or when you need to change the render. Any other use case, manage it from the screen.
There's one more use case for field configuration.
Enlighten
If
me.
you want a project specific description on the field, that's
Right,
done
right,
at
yeah.
the field configuration.
But that does mean you now have to go through all the hurdles and if where is he at? If Phil's saying lots of clicks equals very complicated, get ready to get carpal tunnel.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It's something I highly discourage, but there are occasions where it is required.
Yeah. All right. So Jana is the project admin for a company managed project, but not Jira admin. She wants to hide the labels field on stories when it's empty. How would she do this? Jana is a project admin for a company, but not a Jira admin. Okay. So she wants to hide the labels field.
So, based on that, we know she's not going to be able to modify these screens.
Yep. I
Um,
think it's this one. She's gonna have to move the field to the hide when empty section. Because you don't want to do the hidden fields because this will get rid of the field altogether. You don't want to do this at the field configuration because then that removes the field altogether. And she doesn't have the privilege to move the field altogether. So it's got to be this one. Process of elimination. Ding. Arjun is the project admin for a company managed software project, but not a Jira admin. Currently, there are separate layouts, one for the Epic, one for everything else. True or false? Arjun can configure a single layout that all of his work types use without supporting. No, because it's broken out. Right? The fact that it's broken
Yep.
out means he needs to do it twice. Next lesson. Gasp, Ronnie, will we actually finish one module? Let's not jinx ourselves.
Let's not get too hopeful. The moment we say something, we're going to jinx ourselves.
I'm so tired. I had a nightmare last night. I had to wake up in the middle of it and I did not get all my sleep.
I mean, it's still better than my Sunday night where I got like an hour and a half worth of sleep.
And welcome to Team 25.
Yeah, I mean, Team 25, that's one thing. At home, that gets concerning.
Yeah, no, we were sleeping very little at Team 25. I think I was going to sleep like at 1 a.m. and waking up at 5. So I was sleeping 4 hours a day. All right. So how do we configure work types, fields, and layouts in team managed projects? Well, this is going to be easy. So everything that we just talked about, you primarily need to be a Jira admin. The layouts is something that your regular users can do, but there is a permission that you can tweak at the company and managed level as well. But for team managed, it works a little bit different. And so a lot of this is going to be a repeat though, right? So work types still exist in team managed projects. You're still going to have request types that sit on top of your work types. So all of this is exactly the same. The only difference I think is really at the power, right? At the permission level, where instead of you basically just don't need to be a Jira admin to do this. So your project will have different default work and request types based on the project template you choose. That's very true because you have so many more templates. Work and request type functionality is very similar. So the Scrum projects come with your epic, bug, story, task, and subtask. Your Kanbans come with the task and subtask. Your service comes with email request, ask a question. This is irrelevant. I don't think you need to care for this.
No.
You can modify the name and description of work types. For example, if your team wants to call the story a user story instead, then they can just change the name. Now, keep in mind that in team managed projects, because statuses and work types and everything are isolated to just a project, you can safely do this without screwing everybody over. If you try to do this in a company managed project, you will have renamed it for everybody. So don't do that.
And
You'll get fired.
By Alex.
By me.
Alex, even if you don't work there, he'll come specifically to your office to fire you.
I have that kind of authority. And just a gentle reminder that if you do make a mistake like this, if you do rename your stuff, it's a pain in the butt. So you need to do two things. One, hit that subscribe button right now. Because again, we were 21 subscribers from hitting 1900. And if you have 100 friends that you know, tell them to also hit subscribe so we can get to 2,000. But more importantly, when you make mistakes like this, like sometimes they're irreversible. I mean, I would say every mistake in Jira is reversible, but some of them are a bigger pain in the butt than others. And so you want to have something like Revyz. You want to have backups for Jira because when you make a mistake like this, you can roll back your changes. If you don't have something like Revyz backups for Jira, then you're really out on your own. And so it's moments like this when you make careless mistakes where you rename a work item that you should definitely have some sort of a backup solution. So Revyz makes that possible. So shout out to Revyz. 118 till 7. So we got 3. Folks, you all got to hit the subscribe button. Everybody hit the subscribe button right now.
How many of them are already subbed, though?
Yeah, that's a good point. Everybody go to your wife's account, your spouse's account, and hit the subscribe button. I know you all have more than one Gmail. Hit that subscribe button now. All right. You can delete any work types that your team won't use. So this is again going back to Rodney's the other Rodney, right? Not this one. There was a comment that the other Rodney did about removing and deleting, right? In a team managed project, you will most definitely delete a work item or if you don't want it or work type. But in a company managed project, you would remove the work type. You wouldn't want to delete the work type because that work type could be, because it's a global work type, it could be used in another project. So deleting a work type is a much more drastic thing that you don't want to do carelessly. But you can remove them all day long. You can remove them from a project all day long and have very little impact. Creating new work or request types. So creating them inside a team managed project is very easy because you just click a button and you just make them. It's very simple. So let's do that now. So let's go to a team managed project here. And you go to your project settings and you go to your issue types and you just literally click this button that says add an issue type. And so you click on that and you can either pick one of the ones that are available or you can make a brand new one and change the icon to whatever you want.
It's nice that they include that on the creation so you don't have to go back and change it.
I know, because in ours, we have to do both. You have to create it
Yeah.
and then go back and change it. But you also lose the flexibility, right? You lose the flexibility to manipulate like the hierarchy. Although, can you just drag and drop things? I don't think you can. No, yeah. You lose things like the hierarchy manipulation and stuff like that. So there's some pros and some cons, but I would definitely, it's a lot easier to create them in team managed projects. You just don't have as much power. All right. So fields in team managed projects. So same thing, right? The field is still the same field, but how you create fields work a little bit different. And you also have a slightly less number of custom field type that you can make. But in a team managed project, when you just want to add a field, you go into the task or the work item itself. Okay, you pick it, and then on the right hand side, you can create over here. Now, updated for this version, right? Something you should be aware of is that whenever you create a custom field in the global sense, right, and for your company managed projects, those custom fields can actually be used over here. So if you wanted to bring in like this job role that is a company managed custom field, you can just bring it in and now use it in the team managed project. So you don't have to recreate the projects anymore. So that is an improvement in team managed projects that just wasn't there a few months ago. So keep that in mind. Now the layout is basically going to be the same thing here, right? So this, when you don't have to go to another place, right? You're where you create the work item, where you add new fields, and where you change the order of those fields, it all happens in the exact same place. So everything that we covered in the last ones with respect to the fat section with pH, the context, the high when empty, all of that happens in the exact same place. So you don't have to navigate to different parts of Jira. Wouldn't that be nice, Rodney, if that company managed projects were nice like that? This is yes, Rodney. This is where you say yes. Or your 2.5 gigabyte thing die again.
No, I'm still here. I'm just thinking back to Mike's interview. Why do team managed projects exist?
Yeah.
I mean, I knew you were going to ask it. It just was a matter of time. It's just didn't know you were going to be that blunt about it.
Well, because I was mad because I got myself lost in the script.
Hmm.
Because my script was in my tiny little phone versus Bob's giant iPad. And so I got lost and I'm like, screw this. And I threw my phone on the table and I went off script. All right. 2 questions here. Yasmin is a project admin for a team managed project. A new team member has a hard time remembering when to use a task and when to use a story to track work. What should Yasmin do? Rename the things. No. Add a short text field to the layout of each word. No. Delete one. No. Modify the description. There we go. Next question. Anton is a project admin for a team managed project. His team wants to track very specific information about bugs. First, they want to know what platform the bug impacts. Then, based on the chosen platform, they want the user to segment the bug impacts. Which custom fields should Anton use? Dependent dropdown? Why would... is there a dependent dropdown in team managed?
There's a drop down. I don't know if it's dependent.
There's a cascading one in the company managed ones, but I don't know about them dependent.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, this is the only one that makes sense, but is this a new feature that Jira doesn't have for us? I earned a badge. But also, what is this dependent dropdown? There is no dependent dropdown. Ooh, Atlassian, we got to talk.
Maybe it's only... No, because that's a Atlassian 1 instance, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I can go to mine and see if they named it differently in the new one.
Would not surprise me.
Team managed software. Project settings. Work types. Task. Create a field. Oh, look. They do have one now. Dun, dun, dun. Dependent dropdowns. This got to go on the Alex Discovers.
So, Bob, that is 52 minutes, 30 seconds into the...
This is cool. I can't believe this actually exists. But also Atlassian. Kudos to Atlassian for updating the documentation, though. Hats off. Okay, so I think that's it for this. I think we should stop here, Ronnie, because there's no point in starting a whole new. We finished this one. We're gonna get started on Thursday with configuring workflows and notifications in Jira projects.
Oh no!
So make sure again you're hitting that subscribe button. Make sure you're checking out Revyz backups for Jira. And we'll see you all on Thursday. Bye, everyone.
See you there.